The coronavirus is having a major impact on the meetings and events industry. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can overcome this challenging set of circumstances by using other forms of communication to reach your audience. From pre-recorded content to live webcasts and virtual meetings, we will consider when and how to use each one and provide some insight that will help set you up for success. So let's jump right in. Welcome everyone, thanks for joining us. I have the pleasure of sitting with three distinguished colleagues that I've worked with in various capacities over the years. Thank you all for being here today during this very crazy time that we're all trying to navigate our way through. First, sitting to my immediate right is Liz Harvey, who is Senior Director of Creative Services at Ashfield Meetings and Events. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you, thanks for having me.
All right. And next we have Neil Stein, who is an event producer with the Creative Group. Neil is very well established here in the Philadelphia area, so thanks for making the time to be here with us today.
Yep, thanks for having me as well.
And finally, joining remote via Zoom today is Tony Brinkman with OPAV. He is the VP of Business Development. Thank you very much, Tony, for making the time to join us today.
Thank you, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
And I think this will give us a really good opportunity to see just how these technologies can be leveraged to bring our audiences together and our presenters together from various parts of the world as we navigate our way through these challenges. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, I think we want to talk about the overall status of the industry and how our clients are responding to recent events that are in the news that everyone is well aware of at this point. Are they being reactionary still, or are we starting to move into more of a strategic phase as these things evolve? So, Liz, I'll probably start with you. You generally sit in front of these conversations based on your role within Ashfield, and I think that allows you to influence some of the decisions that are being made. So, what's your take on how your clients are generally responding to things as they develop, and are they being reactionary still, or do they have some plans in place as to how to proceed?
I think there's a real mix of client responses. I think some of the larger client teams that we work with who've had earlier adoption of some of these technologies are better placed to be more strategic in the way that they've pivoted. But there's certainly been early on, perhaps in the last 2 weeks or so, some really reactionary decisions being made, which perhaps have not sort of driven the best outcome from a virtual perspective. I think they're starting to recognise and realise that if they can just hit pause a little bit and be a bit more strategic and take a little bit more time, they're probably going to get a better outcome from a virtual solution. So I think we're starting to come out the other side of the very reactionary sort of phase.
Okay. And that probably evolves a bit as the news comes out every day. I mean, it's pretty crazy when you watch the evening news, how much, changes are being forced upon us almost, limitations on the size of groups that are able to gather. So it's interesting to see how all this is going to play out over the next several weeks and months. So Neil, as far as you, since you primarily work on more of a local level, has the reaction been the same as what we're hearing from Liz?
Yes, I would say a lot of my clients have been very reactionary right now. They are waiting to hear the news updates, see what the restrictions are. Everybody is putting the health of the attendee, first and foremost, and that's really what matters first.
And with your events, I would imagine that you're probably involved in the process from a fairly early point of view as well, right? So a lot of the events that you're planning don't take place from several months down the road from now. So they are probably still very much in a hiatus type of status. They're not sure how to proceed. Would that be fair to say?
Anything that we would be planning like 6 months down the road, we really haven't gotten into the full-fledged planning. Our main focus right now is everything coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So April through July right now is sort of what we're trying to look at and establish how to proceed with those. It's an interesting time, and we're weighing all the costs and evaluations, and we will see where it takes us from there.
Okay. So Tony, that brings us to you. Again, thanks for joining us remotely. I think that you and I are probably in a similar position where we're further down the funnel. We're service providers, and clients usually come to us when they seem to have somewhat of a plan in place. So being in that position, do you feel as though your clients currently are coming to you for solutions and to help aid them through this process, or are you just getting the phone call that says we are planning planning to do X, Y, or Z? What's that been like?
We're right now in still the very much reactionary phase where we're getting the phone call that says, we're not having our event on this date anymore, but we're doing our due diligence, what the options are. Certain clients are engaging us in virtual options and what the reality and price points are involved with that. But a lot of it right now is there's so much uncertainty that folks just don't know whether they're postponing or they're rescheduling or just canceling altogether. We've had probably a 50-50 mix where we've gotten the phone call and said, here's the new dates, because they're working out their agreements with the venues to avoid attrition and cancellation clauses and things like that.
Yeah. So in this brief conversation that we started having, the word virtual has been mentioned twice now. So as event professionals, we certainly know that the technology exists. It's nothing new. But I guess, Neil, from your perspective, what options do clients have, really? They still need to communicate, probably now more than ever, to a certain extent. So what options would you suggest are out there and worth exploring?
There are lots of options. I mean, the first thing you can go with would be more of a pre-recorded conference. So having all of your speakers that you had lined up for a conference or a speaker convention already in the room, meeting up with a camera crew, much like what you do today. Present the panels and information in a studio. You can do it all as one major, push through and have them watch like they would a regular conference, either from their office or their home. Or you can pre-record it and put it out in bites and digital, 2 to 20 minute digestible bites, and watch at your own leisure.
Yeah, and that's a good consideration, because at this point I think we're in a place where a traditional virtual meeting, at least the way that I would think about it, you still have a live audience that you're attending to. I think a lot of that is probably going to go away for the short term, so these meetings are going to evolve more to like a broadcast situation, not too dissimilar from what we're doing here today. So, Tony, I think I'd like to hear your perspective next. A lot of people still struggle with the vernacular and exactly what they should be asking for when they start to engage with AV suppliers. There's a lot of words out there like webinar, web stream, live stream, webcast. I like to sort of break it down into just a few key areas that clients should be thinking about. Is it a one-to-many type of broadcast? Is it a one person or a panel of people from one location disseminating information to a group? Or does it need to be a truly interactive experience where there are multiple contributors across an online platform? I'm just curious what your thoughts are, and what type of questions should our clients be prepared to answer when they start to reach out to you for a solution?
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent point. I mean, you touched on a lot of the big ones. We just went through an event that was going to proceed until the state of New York put their bans up on the number of attendees. And, we had the backup plans. They didn't have a tremendous amount of budget to spend. So it was really just how down and dirty can we make it so that the presenters, if they couldn't get to site, could do the presentation. So it's the expectations. Do you want your presenter to be able to see the audience? Can it just be a wide shot of the room, or do you want to invest in camera operators that are able to zoom the cameras in on people if they're asking questions? Pay to play is a big thing right now. And what I mean by that is, do you want it to be where your attendees via the virtual meetings have to enter in payment information and are paying to watch whatever stream you're doing? The big thing, as you know, Dave, is it's all about the quality. Is it an internal meeting that you're having where you're less concerned about the quality involved and you're less concerned about camera angles and lighting and things like that, and it's more just we need to get our message across? Or are you trying to do a marketing and sales event to customers and things like that, where the production value is still extremely important? So I think those are all big topics to discuss.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. So I think the takeaway there is, as clients are starting to consider how to roll these meetings out, just be mindful of, are your presenters able to gather in one location, or do we need to bring them in from multiple locations? And what level of interaction does the audience need to have with the presenters themselves? Because that will factor into the decision as to how we think that you should proceed with technology. Of course, we all can adjust very well, as we've learned to do, but I think the more information you have earlier on will help us come up with the best strategy and use your budget, most appropriately. So it sort of is segueing into our next topic of discussion. So there's an elephant in the room. This technology, we all acknowledge, has existed for quite some time, but the clients still seem to be reluctant to venture into these areas. And I think that there are a multitude of reasons that would vary from client to client. You and I had an interesting conversation last week where, nobody wants to be the first to roll this type of meeting out, because what if it fails and now you're left, having to explain.
Yeah, and I think they're doing that in bite sizes. You look at the function of what that's serving. So if you have to get information out, they're taking those pieces of information and doing that in a virtual environment. And I think we will start to see people get more and more comfortable with it. I don't think we're going to have the shift where everything goes to virtual when the normal world returns, because I think there is that need for human interaction and communication and interactivity. But I do think this is going to drive a bit more comfortability within clients around that the technology does work, it is out there, you can deliver these things in a way that is successful and impactful.
Right. Great point. So, Neil, I know that you've had some success, because I've been on the events where you've done this, where you actually leverage multiple technologies almost to create a bespoke offering for the client. So if we take the case of one of our shared clients, they may use WebEx, but also Slido as an app to bring in some additional interaction and engagement throughout the audience. Do you have any other advice or things that you've seen be successful out there with these types of meetings?
I think we're going into uncharted waters here with this type of setup. I would say you have to think just like you would a normal in-person meeting. You have to think of ways to, pushing the brink of your technology, but also the format and how you want to engage the attendees. Over the past few years, we've come a long way with digital technologies, but a lot of clients are also going to soft seating, sofas, enhanced food stations, interaction. That way, it incentivizes the guest to have a more comfortable experience. Right. So now you're thinking, well, where is the guest watching from now? Are they in an office? Are they in a cubicle? Are they in an open office where they have zero privacy? Or now, are they at home right now with the family running around them, trying to get through their normal workday and attend this conference while doing everything? Yeah. So, you have to put in some sort of incentive, interactivity, think games, trying to say, okay, you're sitting at home, let's do a scavenger hunt. First person to go into their house and find this item, bring it back and say, and you've won this prize. Really get people to want to say, okay, I'm here, I'm present, I'm paying attention. That was a little fun moment. Now let's hear the content.
It's a great idea. I think you were going to say something.
Just as well, you brought up a good point there, that one of the things that from a live meetings point of view that's changing is when you have a live meeting from a client point of view, you generally tend to dictate where it's going to happen, what day it's going to happen, the times that it's going to happen, and you have some control around that structure. When you move to some of these more virtual technologies, they're actually very user-driven. So it's about the user experience rather than what's been pushed out, and I think there's an education piece to do around that in the industry from a client perspective, that they can't control every view of what every individual is seeing from a virtual perspective, because they've been designed to be user-driven.
That's a great point. And while we do spend a lot of time as an industry talking about the attendee experience, I think as we start to move into this world potentially of people doing more of a broadcast style meeting, we also really have to consider how we're making our presenters feel. What have you seen that works that could help someone so that they're not feeling like they're alone on an island talking to a wall?
I think the best way, depending on where your audience is, if they're in an overflow room and there's a smaller amount of people, having a satellite feed camera or just, a Steadicam just focused on them on a fixed wide shot, getting that reaction, that applause, and showing that to the awardee may make a meaningful difference. If there is not an overflow situation, you sort of go into the world of your Facebook Live videos or Twitter reactions, even if you're not publicly going on Twitter, but some sort of reaction where people can type in their comments, send animations across the screen, balloons, that sort of stuff to make them feel like that.
Another thing that we haven't really discussed today, but in talking about the presenter role in this different type of environment, I would suggest to all of our clients that they consider some additional lead time so that they can have a producer involved to actually communicate with them and say, this is the expectation, this is the back end communication that we can have so that you're not feeling alone. When we're going to come to you. If we're broadcasting from Toronto and all of a sudden they want to come to Mount Laurel, there's people in Mount Laurel that are just kind of waiting, not really knowing what's going on and when they're going to segue to them. So I think having a producer involved in these types of meetings that experienced in, not only creating a show flow, but the way for these events should be directed, that's a role that should strongly be considered as we start to go down this road.
And I think that's a really important point in those. You talked about this reactionary sort of mode that we're in and that we're feeling. I think it's really important, and the conversations that we're having with our clients is, just because the technology exists doesn't mean we should do this on Tuesday. It needs to be thought through. It needs to still be, the content needs to be curated. People need to understand how it's going to link between, whether it's different geographies or different mediums. You need the same sort of conversations, if not even more so, when you're preparing to go into any sort of virtual environment, to be able to bottle that essence and bottle that emotion and make that connection.
Yeah. So to piggyback off of that, Neil, in your role, what are some things that clients should consider in terms of collateral that's helpful in producing these types of meetings? It's more now than just about the PowerPoint. We have to consider lower thirds and logos. Anything that you can add to that?
I think the one thing I would say is to minimize your expenses on the post-production, is treat it as live as best as you can.
Yeah.
Because, if you're going to shoot this thing and then going to go back and try and tweak it, you could be spending days, hours, and months in editing to try and get this perfectly right.
Right.
Whereas you treat it as live, it's a similar reaction as though it's a live event, and you're able to record it, do some quick edits, put your bumpers, titles, lower thirds, and get it out there as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Most of our clients have the expectation that we want it now. Like, they won't even walk away without having that hard drive to jump on the plane with, or at least, can you deliver this by tomorrow so that we have the link and we can download it. So Tony, production obviously always helps with engagement, right? What are some considerations that people should consider when they bring in a remote presenter? How could we help put people's minds at ease that, yes, we can do this, we have the experience, and here's what we've learned?
I think some of it is, a lot of it is education. I know one of the things that we're kind of working on internally is a little bit of a checklist to try to help get what the setting they're going to be in is. Something that we're facing right now, just transparently is, I'm doing this from my home because I work from home when I'm not on the road, and I don't have a hardwired internet connection. So while we've got wireless that's 100 meg up and 100 meg down, I'm still crossing my fingers that I don't freeze on you. But the checklist of, again, like you mentioned, proper lighting, what kind of backgrounds to look at. Again, as we were talking, and as Neil was mentioning the scavenger hunts, I was thinking, from the engagement standpoint, I have small children. They love to watch other people play video games on YouTube. I don't know why that's so engaging to them, but as an industry, figuring out what that is for all of us, so that, as you mentioned, the attendee wants to sit in front of their computer for 20 minutes and not be distracted by what's on TV in the background or what just popped up in their email. But another thing we're working to also help with those situations is small kits that we will ship out to you with tutorials, so that you have a better camera than what's just in your computer per se, so that you have a lavalier microphone to put on as opposed to just trusting your webcam. We've got as you know, David, the technology has come so far. I mean, even lighting kits now are extremely low power and compact, so that, if you want to have a higher quality presentation, but you don't want to invest in all the equipment and whatnot, there's the support for that.
So just in talking about that a little bit further and engagement, I know when I was with Ashfield, I've seen them actually send out some analog solutions, we'll call for lack of a better word, that would tie in and work in tandem with a virtual meeting. So if you know that you're going to have a specific online audience, let's send them a little gift in advance so that when we take our break, they can open up their kit, and in that kit might be an apple and a bottle of water with a nice branded message, or a giveaway, a stress ball, whatever the case may be, just so that they actually feel like they're part of a group, they have something to interact with, and it's touch them in a different way than just staring at a computer and waiting for the information so that they can go on with their day. So I think let's just go a little bit in a bit of a different direction with this. Let's say everyone's on board, they love what we're saying, and they're going to start to roll out these types of meetings. So Liz, I think I'll look to you. I had a conversation with a client of ours recently that was exploring this type of meeting and broadcasting from their hotel venue, but they were very concerned about food and beverage minimums, the hotel nights, because they had already contracted with the space. And that's something I'd never really considered. So as an AV provider, I don't have as much insight as to how you could potentially save money by negotiating away ballroom fees. Like, how would that change for a client if they decide to start having meetings this way?
From our point of view, and even in the last couple of weeks, we have utilised some of that space. So to Neil and Tony's point, we've actually gone with the crew. The speakers have gone there, and we've broadcast live from that venue. Because that investment had already been made. So we utilised some of that space in order to do that. I think beyond that, it's ensuring that you really utilising expertise in terms of the contracting at an early stage, and that you're looking at those clauses and being able to enforce force majeures where it's appropriate in terms of government or local advisory on restrictions in places.
That's appropriate conversation to have if you have to cancel a meeting and you've already contracted the space. However, as we start to go down the road, that's not going to become as large of an issue. Usually when clients reach out to me, they're saying, we're having a meeting, here's what it's going to be, here's where it's going to be. And a lot of times they've made the wrong decision before they've consulted. So I'd like to kind of get in front of that. Tony, I'm sure you would as well. You don't have to go into a large ballroom or a large conference room to do this type of meeting. I'm sure if the camera pulls back at some point, you'll see that we're in a nice little office space here. And the environment's much better because it's quiet. You don't have to worry about a lot of outside noise. I know one consideration is always, is there available power? Is the internet fast enough? What have you seen, Neil, in your experience that you would suggest a client consider before going to this type of meeting?
If you're trying to go strictly to a virtual and booking a room in a venue, their negotiations sort of have become away from your food and beverage, because there's nowhere you're going to hit a food and beverage minimum. And the venues are going to come at you with a daily room rental fee on that space. And this is what it'll take. You'll probably have a little less flexibility if that hotel has some sort of clause about outside third-party AV vendors, because they're not making as much off the food and beverage or the hotel nights or any of the ancillary charges. So they're going to try and recoup as much money out of this as possible. Right. So that's one thing I would say to negotiate in advance, well in advance, is if you're bringing in a camera crew, find out what their policy is and make sure you're in a venue that you can bring in your own camera crew, scenic, whatever elements you want to make this your best possible.
One thing that's interesting that we've started to take advantage of that people may want to consider if they go down this road towards a virtual broadcast or a virtual meeting, you're going to have a film crew there. So how can we take advantage of that? Because we don't have to worry about a turnaround time with the venue. We can actually book space within your facility, set up a mobile studio. We can deliver the message that you want, but let's take advantage of the crew that we're already paying for and the equipment that's here. What else can we get out there? What other content can we shoot, whether it's for our social channels or for our stakeholders, whatever the case may be. So I think a lot of times I would probably steer clients towards using their own facilities for these types of meetings and not going outside at all, especially if it's a similar format to what we're doing today. Tony, I think one last thing that I'll go to you for before we wrap up is one of the major areas of pushback that we always get from our clients is IT tends to show up at the 11th hour and say, well, what protections are in place? How is our data being protected? Who's going to be able to access this? We work a lot through Liz with the pharma industry, which is particularly cautious in those areas. We also deal a lot with the financial institutions. What's your experience been, and what have you seen that's been successful in terms of helping clients to understand that their data is protected as we deliver these meetings?
I think in regards to that, it's having that discussion up front so you know what protections they want to have in place and need to have in place. And then it's making sure, from whether you're using Zoom or you're using live stream or Google Chat, whatever mechanism you're using, that they have password protection options. There's geographic and domain restrictions that can be set up so that if you're just having your Northeast meeting and you know that the personnel are there, you can restrict other areas from getting into the meeting. Again, if you're doing the quote unquote pay to play setup, making sure that whatever system they're utilizing has the proper protocols to protect everybody's financial information, because no one wants to deal with getting hacked and credit card information being out there. And then just making sure there's AES video encryption. Those are some of the big things that, when you're talking to whoever your provider is, find out what service they're using to, get your message out there and make sure that the appropriate protocols are in place based on how much security you want.
Yeah, that's great information. And aside from just the security information, I think as a general rule of thumb, it's a very good idea to engage with your IT department before you go down this road, because some organizations that we deal with, we get it quite a bit, where they just don't have the bandwidth to support it. They want to stream an event to 3,000 viewers, and all of a sudden they're having buffering issues because IT wasn't given the heads up, they didn't open the pipeline, and now they're struggling to have everyone log on and view high definition video all at one time. So I know that we've all had to navigate those waters at one point or another, so let's get IT involved nice and early in the process so we can work all of that out. So I think finally what I'd like to do is just a quick round robin and get everyone's opinion on this. So as clients are starting to make this decision, can we save them any time by saying, for this type of meeting, you don't want to go down this road for virtual. This is more meant for a face-to-face environment. Is there anything that you would steer clients away from delivering a meeting in this type so we can save them time?
I think from our perspective and the sort of events that we're doing, it's not about whether the event happens or not. It needs to happen. There's an element of education or information that needs to be out there. It's how we deliver that. So what's the best way to take that and deliver that in a way that it's going to resonate or have impact? So you were talking about, taking advantage of having a film crew in place. That we're certainly doing that with a virtual element, but creating some on-demand content that sits with that. And so it's looking at the right form of delivery for the right piece of content. So it's not so much that it shouldn't happen. It's just how do you do it in the right way?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Neil, anything to add?
Yes, it's really, how do you capture the excitement and energy from a room, put it in a bottle, put it on camera, and get that out and convey that message over a video. So that really is the challenge. It's a creative challenge, which I believe all of us are really up for and looking at, but It's finding a way when that person wins an award or receives an award and they want that recognition, that standing, oh, the music's going, they're on stage and they're giving that speech in front of 1,000 people. How do you transfer that to a digital world? And how do you make that special for them? You know, even if just for this short-term amount, to make them feel that, especially now, people are going to want to feel acknowledged and recognized. So, you know.
And they could probably look to television for a lot of ideas. You know, it's not too dissimilar what we're trying to do here with virtual meetings as what you would view in a typical broadcast. So watch The Amazing Race or whatever the case may be and learn. Tony, anything to add?
I mean, just to that point, Dave, I was thinking, as we've been talking, from the standpoint of being able to create the excitement without having all of the travel and things like that, you know, digital backgrounds. There's a lot that can be done with, I mean, we see it all the time on the news, the weather and green screening, things like that. And then we also see it when you watch sporting events, talk shows, you know, the staging. People don't realize how small of a space that those take place in, and you can still bring production value in without causing a whole lot of people to be traveling and or you know, all confined in one space, and still have fireworks going off in the background or the lighting shooting all over, you know, confetti cannons, whatever it is. Again, you can make all of that happen, and have everybody feel that through the system.
Yeah, that's great. All right, thanks everybody for joining us today. I think we had a great conversation. We're going to put all of your information up on the screen so that people know how to contact you if they have any questions or want to talk about this type of meeting and event further. So thank you once again. Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, everyone. I want to let you know that we've put together a quick reference guide for Zoom webinars that you may find very helpful. Many of our clients have been asking us, what's the best virtual meeting platform? And we feel it's Zoom Webinar because it allows you to connect up to 100 remote video participants and up to 10,000 view-only attendees. However, Zoom's website doesn't provide much detailed information on how it works. So lucky for you, we made a deck that outlines the key features and includes some screenshots to help you decide if it's right for you. Just head over to ajievents.com/Zoom webinars, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out.